What do you do when you have nothing? Oh crap, I have a blank piece of paper in front of me. It's like, how do you start? I haven't listened to this audio at all, but I'm thinking that that could be a good thing because this is kind of the exercise. If you think,
I never asked to be made. Stephen, I'm sorry. I never wanted you to see this horrible place.
damn it, and I loaded up a mail, Malcolm. How presumptuous of
You should have known better.
So I'm not familiar with this audio, which is good because that's exactly what we'll do. So we'll treat it as if this is a brand new shot in your desk. You have no experience with it. You're just going to figure it out. So you've got two audio clips, so let's hear them both, and then we'll just pick one, right?
Never asked for it to be this way. I never asked to be made. I never asked for it to be this way. I never asked to be made.
Sometimes I feel that way too. Now let's see the other one, which is like 100. Okay, one sec.
Stephen, I'm sorry. I never wanted you to see this horrible place.
All right, let's go with the first one because it's got a bit more contrast to it.
Mm.
So she starting.
Never asked for it to be this way. I never asked to be made.
So she's pleading and then getting upset. So this is kind of a good example of the old adage: what is the character thinking and feeling, and why? And then the newer adage of what is the character thinking and feeling, and how do they feel about the thoughts and feelings they have. So new CG, like new feature, has evolved slightly to where you're trying to express a lot of internal emotions, but that's featured, and you don't have time for that. Let's ignore all of that, and let's assume this is like Steven Universe or any given show like that, and let's make this as clear and direct as possible while still conveying the emotion, right? So I think we can do that. It's almost conveniently broken up for us on the timeline. You've got one emotion. I never asked for it to be this way. I never asked with a sob. To be made, right? So here's one emotion that's very clear. A break in the emotion and then a continuation of that emotion. And then a heightening of that emotion. So if I were to look at this entire piece, just right off the bat, no boards. Let's assume we don't have any storyboards, or we do, but they're not good, right? Or too many poses, or there's all kinds of reasons why you wouldn't follow the board. So let's just say we don't have any boards at all. Right away, just looking at this audio, the way that audio is structured, 3 poses. That's what I'm looking at. And you can normally do like 100 frame rule, where it's like 1 to 2 poses per 100 frames, because it's just not really enough time in TV and a TV schedule to be doing a ton of different poses, right? Because you're just going to get lost in trying to transition from pose to pose. So first step I would do is I would kind of act it out, right? So I'll hit play, and then I will awkwardly act this out. I'll stand up, and then I'll hit play, and then we'll see if I can kind of figure something out. So there's a lot of like subtle ways to film things where you can even put a picture of someone on the wall and you're making eye contact with the picture so that your eye line is correct, right? I won't bother with that because we can just correct things later. But there's another way to film reference, which is you're not thinking about the actual line itself, but you're thinking about the subtext of the line, right? So in this case, I think it's clear enough. And we'll treat it a bit like TV where we're not really worrying about the subtext, right? So that being said, I would then start to break this down as almost a dance or looking at it rhythmically. So we've already picked out that there's going to be 3 poses based on the audio peaks in the timeline, or the way that the audio is broken up emotionally gives me 3 different poses, right? So I'll play it again. And with that in mind, with the rhythm of it, I'll try to act something out.
I never asked for it to be this way. I never asked to be made.
Something like that, right?
Yeah.
So we can kind of break it down. So what I'm kind of getting, and we could explore this for days, right? And if you have the luxury of feature, you can do that. You can sit there and think and sketch and all this kind of stuff. But if we're talking about efficiency and speed, then that first bit of acting, I think, having listened to the line, analyze, talk about the 3 different poses, I think that works. So the first line is like pure externalized expression, if you want to think about it like that. So I never asked for it to be this way. That's an exclamation. I'm trying to tell you something. I never asked for it to be this way. So we can break up the peaks of the audio and decide that we want to push this acting forward. So you can retreat an action, or you can push it forward. You can increase the tension, or you can release the tension. In this case, for the first audio peak, I'm going to increase the tension. I'm going to push it forward. So I never asked for it to be this way. And then the sob will be a little bit of a release, so a little bit of a sink, but I'm not going to go back. I'm going to keep going forward. So I never asked for it to be this way. You're releasing tension. I never asked to be made, kind of thing. I asked to be this way. I never asked to be made. So it feels like a very pleading type of line. And you can pick, and I would say we'll do maybe like a mid shot, cut it off at the waist. You could easily have the character pose for efficiency and speed, so there are no arms. Like I never asked for it this way, but it's like, yeah, I never asked for it to be this way. Kind of pushing forward, like a change in direction. We're still pushing forward, but there's a release now, a release that also then leads to like another welling up and an expression of emotion. So, I never asked for it to be this way. Pleading, going forward. You can see like the shoulders will go up and down. It's a little bit of a defeat. I never asked to be made. So the last part will be a release in tension, pushing it forward. The beginning is going to be a build-up in tension. The sob is going to release, and we're going to continue to release that tension. So if we choose to not have any hands, then it's all shoulders, right? So then we need to frame it, from here to here. But if we're going to pull back a bit, and we want to have hands, we can choose. Does she want to do this? And then we're getting into what is the character? Is this a strong character who's having a moment of weakness? Is this a weak character who's expressing more weakness? Is this an ambivalent character who's caught off guard? And you can just kind of go down the list of emotions and archetypes and play it that way. Or someone who's physical, or someone who is gruff on the exterior, would almost square off. So they don't face people front on. They're gonna, they're not gonna face. So let's say this is the person they're talking to. They're not gonna stand like that. They'd be off a little bit, right? But then if we're gonna film it where it's 3/4, then I'm gonna actually do this, and then I'm gonna face forward, right? So now I have an angle in my head. I'm gonna try to get like this, right? So I'm kind of being standoffish in a way. Like this is almost like an aggressive building of tension. Like I never asked for it to be this way. We won't go that intense, but we might as well get the hands in here then. Like I never asked for this, Yeah. And then since this is like a gesture of control, then we're going to have to loosen that. So there's going to have to be, I never asked for it to be this way. And then we're kind of retreating in, like, then would this character, would they touch their face to kind of like convey that they're trying to keep something in, because it's like now there's this emotion that's coming out that's contradictory to their gruff exterior. So you've got this, like, I didn't, I never asked for it to be this way. I never asked to be made, or whatever, right? So you get to kind of pick what you want to do, and because it's such a short shot, I would avoid going from hands down to hands up to hands up to hands down. I would just pick something. So I think we'll keep the hands in frame, and then maybe just kind of come up and then just release it a little bit. And then as we pose it out and we play it on the timeline and we play with it a bit, we can always adjust the poses based on kind of how it's turning out. So so normally I would film a reference pass, and I wouldn't bring the reference into Maya. I don't like doing that. I know there's lots of different opinions on that. I find if I bring my reference into Maya, I get too married to it. This is what it has to be. I'm not going to deviate from it. Oh, it's not matching. If you do that, I find there's no room for like improvisation. So exactly like what we just said there. Here are the poses we're going to do. We're going to do this, that, the other. And then when we get in here, we're going to leave room for improvisation. Let's get to it. Let's see what happens. I would leave the animation for the face for last, but I would key out a good facial expression now, because when you act out your character, you will find that it's easier to get the right poses when the face is already there. Like if you keep going back to a blank face, then you don't feel registered or connected with that character.
Yeah.
So I like to try to just lay out like some sort of base emotion and then figure it out later. So because I don't have boards, then we're kind of going from memory a little bit. But that's quite all right. So we decided that she should be a little kind of pleading, or sorry, not pleading, a little aggressive in a way. So, and in terms of like posing out a character, you can see that the head follow is off, or let me check what it's called on this rig. This is called orient to placement. So orient to placement is set to 1. You also call it head follow or orient to roll or blah 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 blah. There's a million different names for it. There's probably 3 different names for it, but this one's called orient to placement. So if I rotate the hips, then the head sort of stays more or less where it is, right? So if you're starting to pose a character out, because I animate in layered approach, then I try to limit the amount of keys I put down or the amount of controllers I use when I'm first posing something out. So I'm going to use elbows, I'm going to use hands, so that's 4 controls, 5 for the hips. I'm going to use one of these torso controls to begin with, 6, 7, 8 shoulders, 9 head, and that's all I'm going to use. And we'll exclude the face controls because I don't want to count them. Too many. But yeah, so that's what you're doing. It's like you pull back, look at all the controls. Since we're not going to use the feet on this shot, it's just a mid shot, then I'm going to exclude those as well. And then I obviously will use the fingers, but maybe I won't count those. But you get the idea. You're trying to and the upper arms, whatever. But you're trying to figure out the least amount of controls you need to make your shapes. So we've decided she's looking at someone here, but she's going to be kind of standoffish, almost squaring off as if she's going to fight. Something like this-ish. And then a really important thing too is like when you're making your poses, pull back, rotate around, and then also the really important thing is to check your camera, because you want to make sure that things are reading in the camera. So it worked in perspective, but then as soon as we go into the camera, it's like, oh, we realize we're missing her arms, right? So I'm going to hunch her forward a little bit, because when you get mad and aggressive, you don't stand like this, you stand like this. You're more tactical, you're more hunched up, right? So I'm sure you remember seeing, and if not, I'll jog your memory. I'm sure you remember hearing about when Glenn Keane was animating The Beast. Did you ever hear that story?
I don't think I have.
It's kind of a funny story, and I took it to heart. When Glenn Keane was animating The Beast, he said at the end of the day he'd be really sore. Right? Because he wasn't animating the beast like this. He was animating like this. Because he would just get in that mindset, right? So that's why I always used to say, like, get up and act it out. It's not so that you have like a super good idea of which poses you should do. It's so that you can feel it. It becomes muscle memory at that point. Like, obviously, you're animating a backflip. Unless you know how to do a backflip, you're not getting up to act that out. But base emotions like anger and sadness, happiness, whatever, just like regular emotions, you can absolutely act those out and feel that. I mean, it's like called like method animating or something. I don't know. So we have an option here because this little hand is kind of getting buried, but this I find is too contrite. This is such an overused pose, but I don't want to create a tangent with the thumb. And I don't want to entirely lose this. I'll keep it in there, but then I'll do this. I might do this. And this is like the nitty gritty of it. Like, it doesn't need to be perfect kind of for our purposes, but it should be close. It should definitely be close, because these are going to be the poses that will inform the whole performance. So. Oops. All right, so let's say we have that. Let's scrunch it forward a little bit. And it's like, if the question is like, how do you know when you've hit the right thing? You just kind of feel it a little bit, and it's based on study. It's based on observation, and it's based on study. That's the biggest kind of thing, and not even just like studying life, but like studying other work as well. They always say, like, don't draw from a photo kind of thing, because you're never really capturing what you see. And I agree, you also shouldn't animate from other animation. But that being said, it's always good to go where good things have been done before, You don't need to reinvent the wheel on a lot of stuff. All right. I don't like the shoulder shape. It's kind of coming up a little bit too much, but I think I can live with it. All right, let's give her some fists. Hand poses are also a lot like facial expressions. When they're not there, it's hard to get a full sense of what's like really happening. You don't get that kind of full emotion. So if we put these in, do some fists or some sort of shape. I mean, it doesn't need to be a fist, but definitely a shape that's tense, right? Sometimes having limits actually forces you to work a little smarter. You can find some really nice improvisations when you have limits. Some really nice workarounds. It's like, oh shoot, I couldn't get this, but I got this instead. So. All right. So and it's funny. So now that I made a fist, this hand doesn't work anymore, because you wouldn't stand like this talking to someone, but you would stand more like this talking to someone. if we've decided that this character is being or is a tactical, aggressive style of character, having a moment of intense emotion, then we can start them off this way. Like they can start out kind of more aggressive, more tactical, and then we'll release that tension over time. So now the beauty of, say, working in TV is that you would have like set-driven hand shapes already, so you could save yourself a great deal of time just sculpting you could save yourself a great deal of time not having to sculpt out a pose like I am here, right? If you have a cog on the end of the hand that lets you just put in whatever, and then boom, there you go. You have one.
I don't use those very often though, just because I find
they're not as precise.
Controllers. Yeah, maybe I'm being too anal retentive about my hand poses, but
oh no, I don't think that's a bad thing. And you can always save your poses out anyway. You can always create your own library, and that's another big efficiency as well. It's like you don't always have to start from nothing. It's just like expressions. Like there are certain set expressions that people will do in a given set of circumstances, and there are also a set number of hand poses. I mean, a fist is a fist for the most part. It's all about how you use this stuff. So, all right. So now I'm just trying to make sure that the wrist is aligned and weighted properly. So this is definitely like a fight pose kind of thing, which I think is okay. We've decided that this character, I guess, was in a fight, or I don't know the context of this line, but that's definitely important to know. You have to know not just what your character is doing in your shot, but what the context of the scene is. It's just like you can't isolate an animation.
Yeah.
If you're, and it's less important in a TV show that's preschool and very formulaic. It's like, well, the character's history is they're a child and they're doing preschool actions to camera, so that's different. But in a show like Steven Universe or Adventure Time, in a show like Star Wars, any of those shows, any shows that are geared more towards like older kids, it's like, okay, yeah, the context does matter because this character now has a history, right? So we're assuming, because I don't know the show very well, we're just assuming that, or I'm assuming that the character is kind of like tactically savvy. So that's how I'll start this thing off. Since I said it's like 3 poses, let's just put in those 3 poses, right? That's almost like the fastest way to do it. You can get really stuck in saying, hey, I've got 45 frames where I said that's one emotional beat. I'm going to put in every single beat in those 45 frames. Right now, that's a waste of time. Like, I want this is what I want. We got this.
I never asked for it to be this way.
Right? That's the tone that I've created now. And then I want to get this part.
I never asked.
So here's our tension, and I want to release that tension. So let's go in and mess with that a bit. So this and then this. So she is going to lean forward a little bit, but the thing we're going to do is going to lean like this, and we're going to bring her hips forward. Oops. All right, I better do this in perspective. We're gonna bring her hips kind of forward. And then That's fine. And then typically bringing your head forward like this is an aggressive thing, unless you lower the shoulders. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to do all this in camera because I just want to make sure that it's working, right? So it's funny, like when you set a pose and then you start to change the pose, you can almost see when you manipulate the controllers that release and tension. You know what I mean? Sometimes a pose is so clear, it's so human, that when you go to animate the reverse, you see it as you start to move your controls. If you've done it right, you know, and I'm not saying this pose is perfect or anything like that, but right here, you can kind of see a release in tension, right?
Yeah.
So if we just, and that was, this is now 3 controllers. So the shoulders and the neck, and if we go from this, the hips, yeah, this to this, right? There's a noticeable release in tension. So let's keep releasing that tension. That's what we're thinking about when we're trying to come up with poses. It's like you're trying to convey an emotion, and then you have to think about what that emotion is and how, in general, a human would convey it. So in this case, and I think maybe her hips have actually gone too far forward. So I'm just going to grab a key back here and fix that. And then I'm going to, all this stuff I'm about to do is for sake of speed, right? So because we're also talking about, you know, as much as we're talking about putting in the right poses and making a shot work from nothing to something, because we're talking about a TV budget and a TV schedule, then we also have to think about efficiency and speed. So I'm going to select all the hands because I don't have any like hand cogs or anything like that. And I'm going to zero this out, right? And now I can pick a pose in here somewhere that is like a released tension type pose, right? And then I'm going to delete this because I didn't want to zero those out. And then now that I've got a bit of tension released, I'm going to go in and sculpt a little bit of the anatomy of it, because obviously the thumb can't go through the fingers.
Mine does that all the time.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, whatever. And then I'm going to like kind of just sculpt specific kind of offsets, right? No, that's not the right word, but I'm just trying to release the tension in an interesting,
yeah,
in a visually appealing kind of way. Looking at my own thumb, how would I go from this to this, you know? So, you know, and it's funny. There's a fragility in this that didn't exist here. It's kind of weird when you, not weird, but it's funny when you start to think about these kinds of things, when you really analyze how to release tension. If you look at the hand, for example, the way a finger rotates, you know, is that this part kind of comes forward first. It's a tendon that's pulling, and then at the very end, the last control or the last part of the digit comes forward, right? So then you release the tension. Thing that moved forward last when you increase the tension is the first thing to release, right? See this, you know, when you increase tension, it's coming from here, right? Tops of the fingers all the way into making a fist. Then when you release it, it's the opposite, right? Yeah. And then, you know, how do you make a, say this is a neutral hand, how do you make a hand interesting? It's all about kind of offsetting and figuring out what you want to do with the fingertips, right? So this is a thumbs up, but something like this is like a little bit more of a fragile pose, like really, you know, retching the top of your thumb back kind of thing. So we could do the same thing here. Like this is a little bit more fragile or relaxed than this is, right? So go there, I guess. And then we'll do like a similar idea with the hand. You're just kind of like, you're thinking about how the tendons are working. And when your arm is tensed, you know, the top of your forearm is tense. And when you relax, your wrist goes limp because there's weight here. There's weight on the fingers, right? And the metacarpals and the tendons in your wrist, you know, they just let go. You flop it over, whatever, right? So
Yeah.
we get to kind of pick how relaxed is she. Is she like this relaxed? Or is she just kind of like, you know, there's still tension on the backs of the hands, but the fingers relax themselves, right? So we'll just keep going with that idea. We'll sculpt out this kind of stuff. And I mean, it's a hell of a lot easier to do when you're not worrying about the fingers. When you can just, like, you know, use a cog or something, and it's like, oh, just go from 0 to 10. It's a lot easier, but you know, that's not where we are. That's not where we're at right now. And on like a feature, like, yeah, you're gonna spend a ton of time on fingers and stuff like that. Those efficiencies don't typically exist on feature rigs because they don't really want you to just say, I'm not gonna put in that extra love, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they want you focusing. On those details, he said while trailing off. So let's look at this. Let's analyze this. You can toggle between the keys and see if you're releasing the tension in like a believable way or an appropriate way. Let's take the controllers off here. Yeah, so I think that works, but let's get a little bit more attitude in here via the head. Boop. Let's see what happens. So I don't like that. I don't like that at all. The reason is because I know when you go to in between this that yeah, that's the reason it wasn't working is because this was coming too far forward and it felt like the head had more weight than it should. So when I was bringing the torso forward, it was feeling like this. Everything was connected, as opposed to it feeling like a tension, like a release. You know, you have rigidity and then you have relaxing. But the way I was doing it was, but that looks like it takes more effort than just letting go. You know, when you let go, your head does tend to come up a little bit. The back of your head can kind of weigh more than the front. So let's do that. We'll have your head go back. And because we had her head go back, let's have her neck go forward. So you can see, like, from here to here, it definitely feels a little bit more relaxed. But now there's too much negative space between her arms and her torso. So let's shore that up a little bit. Then you get this, right? Which looks a lot more relaxed. And then I'm gonna increase that to get a triangle shape in here. It's kind of hard to see, but right in here, I want like a triangle shape, as opposed to before I was getting like a straight line. So yeah, so I still want a little bit of a shape in there, but I still want to like decrease that tension. And we're being quite thorough right now, just to show like you know, how to kind of release tension and stuff like that. So I could even increase this. And then take the shoulder. I almost think it's the angle. I would want to bring this in almost, but I'm worried about what it's going to do to the rig itself. I'm just curious. Just want to try that. It does look a little better. I do like that. I want to try and keep her hands in screen. This is just a personal preference. I find when you lose hands like that, like on edge of frame, if the hands are like popping in and out all the time, it's very distracting for me. It feels like a mistake, you know? It feels like it just wasn't composed properly. And then I would say, oh, pull the camera out or just adjust up the hands. So let's do that. Let's just see what we can do here. So I think that'll feel a little bit more natural, right?
Yeah.
Then you're just not losing something, right? Mm-hmm. And so because I did that, this hand I find now comes in too far. Yeah, I like that. I like that a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
And then again, I would normally leave all the facial expressions until the very end in terms of animating them. But here, because we've said we're basically just shifting between, I guess, straight anger to then pleading, like sadness pleading. I wouldn't even consider it. I wouldn't even consider it straight sadness. It's a pleading. It's like, I didn't want this, you know. So hey, turns out there is subtext here. There you go. Who knew? Who knew? But so I will lay out a few more facial poses than I normally would, because we're just trying to carve out the base emotion. It'll really just help with figuring out the poses. It's like you'd be surprised how just having like a facial expression does that. Oh, and you'll notice too, I didn't go up here. I went over instead, because I want to create a different type of shape. If I just went straight up, then it wouldn't convey as much sadness as kind of that. Mm-hmm. I want the flow in here. There's almost like a flow I'm trying to create in here. We don't have brow fat controls, but that's kind of what we're trying to do. Do the same over here. And then I'm going to bring these up. And for the fun of it, let's do this. Again, just kind of just laying in, you know, base expressions for just for the sake of posing. It really is easier to pose something out when you have the correct emotion on the face. So the tension's been released, and I think you can really see it. And maybe we've exaggerated a little bit, but of course, exaggeration's a principle, so that's okay. And that's exactly what we want. And I have a shortcut that turns the controls on and off. So if you're wondering how did he do that so quick?
Oh my God!
Hotkeys. So yeah, so we're releasing the tension, and she's getting sad, ready to sob, and then we'll have to go into another type of tension release, and let's figure out what that pose should be.
I never asked to be made.
Okay, so I'm gonna. What I had said before was that around here, around frame 85, is the new emotional beat, which is true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the next pose has to go there, because even though we're only going to do 3 poses, I'm going to basically do 4 or 5 actions, if you want to think about it like that. So from 1 to 40-ish, 1 to 40, that's going to have an action in it. It's still one pose, but I'm going to act within it. Then I'm going to release the tension around 49, act within that for a second, probably to around 70-ish. Then I'm going to put my new pose around the height of this new word. So ask. I never asked for this. So we're going to create a bit more tension and then release it again. So when you're posing something out, I had trouble verbalizing that what I was looking for was squash and stretch in the pose, or depending on what type of rig you have, like elongation or compression, because not all rigs, especially in TV, are going to give you squash and stretch. But you can still create the feeling of that by elongating certain parts of the body and then collapsing other parts, right? So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it through her neck, her head, and her shoulders. And then her arms will have to do that as well, just to follow the line of action. So turn the controllers back on. And I'm going to push this forward. So when I say push it forward, I mean, if I start here and I want to go here, I'm never going to try to retreat or go back to where I was. That's called, you call it like resetting. It's like if I'm talking like this and then I do this and then I go back to the first pose I have, I've reset in a way. I didn't push it. I didn't push anything forward, and I didn't retreat the action. I didn't build tension and release it. You know, that kind of thing. Because you can act this way and back, which looks very robotic, very mechanical. So I'm going to try and push this forward in the sense that I'm trying to create new tension or create a new pose that's not where the last pose was. I never want to go back to where I was. You never really want to go back to where you were. Even if you're doing overshoot and settle, you know, it's like, boom. You never want to go back where you were. You want to go back to a brand new spot. So that's exactly what we'll do here. And then I can see when I go from key to key that that's not actually what I want. If you swap back and forth, then you notice that the head was going back to where it was, but I want to push it forward. It was already rotated in Y a certain degree. Then we change it and we push it. And we push it again. I don't want to go back to where I was. I want to kind of go to a new place. So I'm okay with that. And then I'm going to go down on the hips. And remember, we're only using a certain amount of controls here just to get like a base pose going. When you go to in between this, or when you go do breakdowns, then you're gonna add more controls. I like to leave stuff open, especially in TV, because you're gonna get revisions. That's just the way TV works, right? So like a walk cycle is a perfect example. If you can create a walk cycle with open controls, meaning controls with no values on them, but you still have a nicely crafted walk cycle, then you can use those open controls to do all your acting. So characters walking, you know, you have all the offset, all that kind of stuff, but you've left a neck controller open.
Yeah.
Now I can look around and none of that information of the walk is lost, right? And I don't have to mess around with layers, like animation layers or anything like that. It's just a control that has 0 values on it, that's following the rest of the body that I can use to act, right? So the same principle is applied here. I'm not sure what I might need those for later, but I know I might need them later. And if I'm happy with my timing and my spacing, and I'm happy with the overall attitude of the character, but a little rotation's off, or a client wants a revision, or director comes back and wants a revision, I know I have contingency controllers I can put those revisions onto without having to rework my entire animation. Okay, so I don't like the way the head rotates there. And I'm just kind of like tracking, right? Now she's drifting over too much. So what I'm gonna do is go on the single axis and just do that. Just a little break, right? And then that feels more like she's moving forward in a correct way.
Yeah.
Never
And then let's check the last little line of dialogue. Just one second.
asked for it to be this way. I never asked to be made.
So we can do, now that I'm thinking about this, because I've kind of been sitting in this for a while and talking about this shot, it might be interesting if she looks away.
Yeah.
A little subtext, like she's ashamed of expressing this emotion, right? Because I remember I said we weren't going to do subtext, but now we're doing it anyway. It's hard not to, and even in TV, because like when you go in feature, you have all this time, you have 4 seconds a week usually, and director's going to give revisions, client's going to give revisions, and stuff like that. So you're always exploring a shot. But there's no reason you shouldn't do that in TV. It's just you just can't explore it for as long. But this might be a good idea, that she looks away. So we can add a layer of complexity to this, saying that she's aggressive when she starts. She's building up this tension that she releases with the sob. And then she's kind of got like a moment of like, what am I doing here? And then she's thinking about it and then is almost ashamed. She's not ashamed that she was made this way or that she has no choice to be this way, but I think we can add on a layer of, ashamed isn't the right word, we can add on a layer of embarrassment. An embarrassment of breaking down a wall and expressing an emotion she wouldn't normally express. Maybe I've misread the character, but I think that could be kind of fun to edit. So.
Yeah. That was kind of why I picked Steven Universe, because I knew you hadn't seen it yet, so you didn't really have that like sort of you didn't have to worry about like mimicking what you'd already seen.
Yeah,
you could kind of go in with fresh eyes.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of half the fun of this exercise is it's about what do you do when you have nothing.
Yeah.
It's that old thing. It's like, hey, I want to draw something. Oh crap, I have a blank piece of paper in front of me. It's like when your character's in T-pose, most rigs are in T-pose. How do you start? How do you start? And I think a lot of people make the mistake of starting in Maya first.
Yeah.
When really you should start right up here. You got to think about it, right? You got to. What's the purpose of this shot? Is this an establishing shot? No, not in this case. Is it an action shot? No, not in this case. It's an acting shot, right? We're trying to convey some sort of emotion. So in order to convey that emotion, as an animator, you have to at least be able to empathize or sympathize, or at least understand what that emotion is, right? Yeah. Otherwise, it just looks like pantomime. It will end up looking very hollow. It won't read like it should. It's going to look stilted. It's going to look pose to pose. It's going to look unnatural. Right? So we've done that. We've dissected this. We figured out the emotions. And now because we didn't film the reference, and if we had filmed the reference, we didn't bring it into Maya. We just had it. About it. Now we're not married to it. Now we've come up with a cool improvised moment where we've said, let's have her look away. Now she's embarrassed. So let's like try to fit that in. So I'll play it through and then I'll see if there's a spot that feels comfortable for me to put that in. So
never asked for it to be this way. I never asked to be made.
So I'm going to do it on Maid. Here's her moment of embarrassment. Not that she was made, but that she expressed she had this regret. And while I'm doing this particular character, and Malcolm as well, has this. The necks are so thin, as you can see.
Yeah. So
I wouldn't want to do something like this, where I've moved the chin so far past the neck. I want to kind of keep that contained a little bit. You know, it just adds a little bit more anatomy to it. And then same thing, I wouldn't want to move her too far over this way.
Yeah.
You know. So, and I think we can kind of get away, and I'll change the expression a little bit, but I think we can kind of get away with releasing a little bit more of the tension in the shoulders and the arms. And in this case, I think I will remove the hands from frame. We'll try that at least. And then I'm going to mess with the expression a little bit. And I might do full closed eyes or at least very heavy lids. At this point, I think she would realize there's nothing to hide. This emotion has been expressed. It's out there. I'm embarrassed by it, so I'll just avert my eyes. But there's nothing I can physically do to rein this back in. So it would be very unnatural for a character at this point to go from this, releasing the tension, back to this. You know what I mean? So let me get in here and I'll lower these a little tiny bit more. I'm going to rotate the torso ever so slightly. And I think a lot of people's impulse would be to bring this back, but I'm going to keep going forward. But I will bring it down a little. And I'm actually going to rotate it this way, I think. And then I'm going to release the tension in the arms. I'm not sure if this will show up on screen in our camera, but I'll do it anyway in perspective. It's always good to do that to make sure that you're animating something that makes sense in 3D space. I mean, it's a CG character after all, so you might as well take a loop around and see what you see, because that'll help you figure out how things should in between as well. Because right now we're just setting poses, which is a big part of our battle. But at the same time, it's like if I don't look around this character and I don't see the dimensionality to it, then I'm going to have a really hard time kind of in between this, right? So let's see what that looks like. Yeah, actually, yeah. So I'll leave the face. Let's just check out what that looks like. Yeah, okay, that's not too bad. And so if you toggle back and forth, you'll see that the neck is moving too far, and so is the head. It's moving in a very linear way. Well, what I really want is for the neck to be a little bit more static. And I want the head to do most of the looking away. And that might be a bit much, just considering how few frames we'd have to do this move. So I won't rotate her head as far away. And then I'm also noticing here that I think the tension I want to release in the torso isn't coming across as effectively. And I think that's either because the hips move too far forward, and this is an example again where we'd have to look in perspective to see what's happened, and that's exactly what's going on. So this is just too far forward, which releases the tension in a way that's not like visually appealing. So now she's like, whoops. Now she's leaning forward, but that's not what I want to convey. I don't want her at this point when she's looking away to lean forward and look away. I just want her to look away. Mm-hmm. It's all in the head, and then I'm gonna have to deflate her body in a way that's not rotating forward. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete these keys. They're not working. And that's another part of trying to figure out how to do things efficiently. If something's not working, don't try to make it work by just pushing forward, because it's not working. You're not going to be able to find the right solution by just plowing ahead. It's always good to go back, right? You know it's not working. There's no point in just hammering away at it. You know? Just reset. You know, it really doesn't take too much effort when you're posing it out, especially doing like a layered technique like this where we're just using as few controls as possible. If you have to reset 2 controls, that's really not a big deal. And I would also recommend doing that for the face as well. If you have to try and push and pull these controllers to manipulate them to get the shape you want, and it's starting to look off model and things are starting to tear, I would take all these keys and completely reset from 0 and build a brand new expression, right? I think that's just sometimes the most efficient way to do things, right? Because then you're not, you know, fighting really hard to figure out how the heck you're going to do it. I think we may very well be getting into territory where we're just breaking the leg. I should have started higher, right? Like you can see how it's kind of tearing. So try to bring that forward a bit, but like I haven't really studied this rig too much, so I don't know what its limits are, kind of thing. But just for the sake of shape, we'll just pretend I didn't do this in here and kind of break it. Yeah, I think this is okay, although I think I will change. I want her neck to kind of come back a little more. I'm not getting the depth I want out of this. Like she's not like recoiling enough, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I'm just gonna experiment. That's not too bad. That's not too bad. I'm debating whether or not to just do like this, which is kind of like an internal embarrassment, or this, which is almost like a pantomime embarrassment, you know.
Yeah.
You could almost bring, oh, the horror, you know what I mean? Like you just kind of, you know. So I don't. That might be too cliche. So let's do like an internalized type of emotion instead. All right, let's see what this looks like.
Never asked for it to be this way. I never asked to be made.
What I see here is that I'm losing this. I'm gonna draw 1 sec. I'm losing this kind of line of action in here. This is terrible. let me try that again. What I'm missing is like this line of action. So I would like to kind of keep that if I could, and that's going to be in the neck. So I'll grab the neck controller and make sure that when she's over here, I'm not now creating a straight up and down shape. I'd like something a little bit more like that. Which then I think feels a little bit more as if the head's doing most of the work instead of the whole body moving at once. And there's a tendency to pose something out where you're just moving in a really stiff way, whereas I just want a subtle, you know, kind of head movement. And the neck's not going to shift too much from where the previous pose was. So. Okay, let's check this, and then I'll go in and I'll do the face.
Never asked for it to be this way. I never asked to be made.
Yeah, I think that's it. And I don't want to bury the eyes too much. And when I say bury the eyes, I mean I don't want to have the pupil or iris too close to the edges. I would say you would never want more than 75% of the eye obscured. So I'm going to leave a little bit of white here. And I'm going to bring these down. So this rig doesn't have as much fine control over the the eyes as I'd like. I'm not able to affect the brow fat as much as you would be on, say, like a feature rig. But that's okay. That's quite all right. There's nothing you can do about that. And you never want to leave what's called an eye shelf here. There's too much of a gap. Anatomically, it doesn't. It's not correct.
Mm.
Now this is a bit too much. And I was always taught you want to go with sort of three graphic shapes when you make your brows, so that there's almost like a distinction. Again, we can draw over top of this. So 1, 2, 3, right? Three graphic shapes is kind of a good rule of thumb. All credit to Mike Safanoff on that one. That's where I learned that. I'd be lost without him. Bring these up. So, like I said, it's like we picked 3 poses initially because we broke the whole thing down into basically 3 emotional beats. So we picked 3 poses to match with our 3 emotional beats. We filmed a little bit of reference. We didn't commit it to film, but by way of recording this, it's there. We didn't open it up and bring it into Maya. We just remembered what we were trying to do, which then allowed for a 4th improvised pose, which I think works better with the tone of the piece. So if you were to look at this, I would say we've blocked it. We've definitely put in poses. True blocking would require breakdowns and a few in-betweens. So you'd have to divide this all up into sections. In this case, I would go 1 to 40 and even maybe 1 to 30 and start to break things down that way. And then I would go from 50-ish to around 70, and then so on and so forth. I would take it section by section as opposed to trying to look at the piece as a whole. Posing is more for looking at the piece as a whole. And then when you start to break things down, now you're deciding style, right? If that makes sense, yeah. Because we could take these poses and we can in between them in whatever style we wanted, because right now it's just 4 poses. So we'll play it through.
Never asked for it to be this way. I never asked to be made. Never asked for it to be this way. I never asked to be made.
Right. And so we can start to go in and we'll decide little things that will help us in between. Little tiny, not micro expressions. We're not ready for micro expressions yet. That would be something that you would add on as you're breaking things down. But like here, it's like what's our eye line now? Do we want her looking here? Do we want a little bit of uncertainty? So we get to kind of decide these things now while we're still posing it out, trying to hit the overall tone of the piece. If you lay in a basic emotion, that's going to help you figure out how you should pose things. On the face, like the more you can have one tone on the face for the whole piece, that helps you figure out where the parts of the body should go. Same thing with the hands. If I have a fist, I'm going to know whether or not they should be rotated in, out. The orientation of those fists will make more sense than the orientation of blank, expressionless hand. So the same is true for the rest of the piece. Just like how the facial expressions inform the poses are going to inform how we're going to in-between and how we're going to do micro expression. So based on my experience, I'm already looking at just these 4 poses and thinking about what I want to do for the first 40 frames, what I want to do from 50 to 75, and so on and so forth. So I can just kind of basically go through that, and then I'll just end my lecture, and then we can just talk about whether it's helpful or not, whatever. But so from 1 to 40, what I see her doing is a bit of a head shake. And she almost can't believe that she has to say this, right? So if we just watch it through, kind of project that on and see if that makes sense to you.
Never asked for it to be this way.
I never asked for it to be this way, right? So I'm doing this because I'm sort of sitting down. But I never asked for it to be this way. I never asked for it to be this way. Right there, boom, 40 frames. Those are my imageries, right?
Yeah.
So what breakdowns would I need then? I would need a shake, right? Maybe 2 or 3 different head shakes. I would need a buildup of increased tension on the fist, and I would need a breakdown of a release again, right? So I could go from here to here. I never asked for this, but this is the sob pose now. This is the crying pose, or that release of tension. So when I go like, I never asked for this, I don't want to go any further than where my sob pose was. Like, I never asked for this. I still need somewhere to go. I'm never trying to go past where I've already set my poses. These are benchmarks now. I can exaggerate them and I can push them, but I don't want to go further than the thing I've already created, right? So we'll watch it again and think, I didn't ask for this.
Never asked for it to be this way. I never asked to be made. I never asked for it to be this way. I never asked to be made.
And then when she says, I never asked to be made, because then we're doing this turn away. I never asked to be made. You're kind of, that's doing the head cock to the side. It kind of breaks the tension of it, but I never asked to be made. Some sort of anticipation where you're going over into the look away, right? Because we have the poses in now, when we play it through with the dialogue in real time, it just starts to emerge.
Yeah.
That's kind of they call it moviola, or it's the animator's eye. Now, the hard part is going from nothing to something. Now we have something. Worst case scenario, we can try a whole bunch of different stuff, in-betweening, breakdowns, all that kind of stuff, and go back to our 4 poses. As long as we have our base of 4 poses, we can kind of always figure out and reset and recalibrate and make the performance what we want it to be, right? But I think this is absolutely the hardest part, is figuring out which poses you should do. But once you have them, and you know the style of your project, you know the style of the other animators you're trying to match, then it becomes a little bit easier. Because if we say, hey, this is a zippy, zany style, like Chuck Jones or Tex Avery, then I'm not going to be like, a subtle head shake. I'm going to bounce around. But then if we say, hey, working on How to Train Your Dragon, so that's a very subtle, naturalistic, very anatomical style, then okay, yeah, I'm going to shift my technique and in between and break down that way. So
Totally.
yeah, I think that's pretty well. Otherwise, I would just start in between and that's like,
yeah.
Maybe I will. Who knows? Not right now. But does that all like make sense? Is that helpful?
Oh yeah, that's great. It's just nice to see another person's process, just because like I don't get a lot of opportunity to look at other people, like watch other people do what they do. So it's just kind of cool to get in someone else's head about how they set up things and, that kind of thing. Because it's hard to see other people's process, basically, when you're working so fast paced.